The first sound I noticed was not the gun being cocked. It was the soft, papery rasp inside my apron pocket every time I breathed. I stood with the other staff against the marble wall of the lower hall while armed men moved through Casa Salvetor like a second kind of weather. Dark suits, earpieces, polished shoes whispering over stone. Someone had left a side gate unsecured, and in Dante Salvator's house that was not a mistake. It was an accusation waiting to choose a body. A footman I barely knew was on his knees near the wine room door with blood at the corner of his mouth. He had tried to explain himself twice. No one had listened either time. I kept my hand flat against my apron, not because I thought I could hide anything. Because the photo inside had already bent once, and I had spent half my lunch break smoothing the fold with my thumbnail until the little white shape in the black grain appeared whole again. 12 weeks, a comma-sized secret, mine, or not mine alone. The men at the far end of the hall went still before I saw him. That was how I learned the shape of Dante Salvator's authority. Silence arrived first. Then he did. He wore a charcoal suit without a wrinkle in it, no tie, the top button of his shirt open just enough to show the hard line of his throat. He was not the largest man in the room. He was simply the one every other body had already arranged itself around. His face was sharper than I remembered from that rain-soaked night in March, when he had been only a stranger with wet dark hair, rough hands, and a voice low enough to make my loneliness do something reckless. Back then he had told me his name was Dario. Liar. Now the whole room belonged to him. His gaze moved over each of us once. Cook, laundress, driver, 2 maids, footman, florist. When it reached me, it stopped. Maybe he knew me. Maybe he only knew a frightened hand when he saw one. "Take your hand out of your pocket," he said. His voice was quiet. That made it worse. I pulled my hand free. One of his men stepped toward me. Instinct made me move back, shoulder hitting cold stone. "I didn't do anything." "No one ever says they did," the man answered. Dante lifted 2 fingers. The guard stopped. He crossed the hall himself. I hated that I remembered his mouth first. Hated that my body noticed the same things it had noticed under rain and borrowed darkness. The stillness, the restraint. The feeling that whatever he touched did not get a second chance to misunderstand him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena, full name, Elena Bellini." He watched me for a beat too long. "You're new, 3 weeks, and yet you've already learned which pocket to protect." Heat climbed my neck. "It's not what you think." That almost made him smile, almost. "Then help me," he said. "What do I think?" No answer I had would save me. I looked at the footman on the floor, at the blood drying on his mouth, at the row of men pretending not to look afraid. Dante's gaze dropped to my apron pocket. That tiny movement felt like a knife. He held out his hand. I did not move. The whole house seemed to lean in. "Elena," he said. There were 2 ways men like him used your name. One to identify you. One to erase the distance before they broke you. I could not tell which one this was. My fingers curled against the fabric again before I could stop them. I saw the change in his face, a minute sharpening, not anger but interest. Dangerous interest. He stepped closer until I caught cold air and cedar and something darker clinging to him from outside. Night, wet stone, smoke he had not actually smoked. "Open it," he said. My throat worked once. "Please, for a pocket." "No," my voice broke anyway, "for what's inside." His eyes lifted to mine then, black, steady, unreadable. "Show me." I shook my head. The guard behind him shifted his weight. Someone near the stairs muttered a prayer in Sicilian. Dante slid 2 fingers into my pocket himself. I should have flinched from the contact. Instead, I stood there and felt the world narrow to the scrape of paper against cotton. When his fingers closed around the folded photo, the words left me before pride could stop them. "Please don't crease it." Not "don't hurt me." Not "please, I need this job." Not "I'm sorry." "Please don't crease it." He pulled the photograph free slowly, carefully. As if he was not sure why that mattered, only that it suddenly did. The black and white image opened in his hand. Even under the chandelier's weak gold light, the little shape was unmistakable. He did not move. Neither did I. The man on the floor coughed blood into his sleeve. Somewhere upstairs, a door shut. A pan clanged in the kitchen and then went silent, as if the house itself understood what had just happened. Dante looked at the date printed at the top, the clinic name, the week count. When he raised his eyes to me again, something in them had gone colder and far more dangerous than suspicion. "Whose child?" he asked. I swallowed. "Mine." That wasn't the question. My pulse beat hard in my gums. I knew what he was asking. I also knew that telling Dante Salvator he might be the father of the child in his hand, here, in front of men with guns and a bleeding servant, would sound like either a trap or a death wish. So I did the stupidest thing I could have done. I stayed silent. He stared at me for so long that the silence became its own answer. Then he folded the photo once along the old line. Not enough to damage it, just enough to put it back in the shape it already knew. He slipped it into the inner pocket of his own jacket. I forgot how to breathe. "No one touches the staff until I say otherwise," he told the room. The order was for them. The warning was for me. He turned to his men. "Get the others out." The lower hall emptied fast. Shoes, apologies, the scrape of a dragged chair, a swallowed sob. The footman was hauled up and taken away. Only Dante and I remained beside the locked wine room door. He looked bigger in the quiet. "You lied to get into my house," he said. "I lied to keep my job. Maybe." His gaze rested on my face, then my empty pocket. "Or maybe you came here because you knew exactly whose child that is." I had imagined this moment in 100 humiliating versions. None of them prepared me for the fact that he sounded less furious than wounded. "I didn't know your real name that night," I said. His jaw tightened once, so he remembered. "Now you do," he said. He crossed the hall, opened the small office beside the stairs, and waited. I did not move. "Inside, Alina," I went. The room smelled like leather and old paper. A desk lamp burned low. No windows. Just shelves, files, and the kind of order that felt built by a man who trusted locks more than promises. I turned when he shut the door behind me. The lock turned from the outside. I did not sleep. I sat on the narrow bed in the staff room with my shoes still on and watched a line of pale dawn appear under the curtain while my thoughts moved in circles too tight to survive. He remembered me. That was the worst part, not the locked office, not the threat hidden inside his calm, not even the fact that he had my ultrasound photo in his jacket as if my future could fit under his hand. It was that I had seen recognition in his face. Months earlier, before Casa Salvator and fake references and pressed uniforms, there had been rain so hard it drowned the street lamps outside the church kitchen, where I sometimes helped plate soup for pensioners and stray boys who pretended they weren't hungry. I had stayed late. He had arrived later, soaked through, carrying a box of donated blankets on one shoulder as if it weighed nothing. He had smiled exactly once, and only at an old woman who kissed his cheek and called him too serious for a man with such beautiful hands. I had laughed. He had looked at me. That was how it started. Not seduction, not strategy. Two tired strangers under a storm, drinking burnt coffee from paper cups in the church vestibule while thunder shook the stained glass. D told me his name was Dario. I had told him mine was Alina because that much, at least, had been true. 1 hour later, he drove me home because the buses had stopped running. 1 hour after that, I was in his arms in a room I could not afford, asking nothing, promising nothing, too lonely to be wise. At dawn, he had gone to answer a phone call in the hall. When he came back, he was already someone else, closed, distant, dangerous in a way my body understood before my mind did. He left money on the table. I left before he returned with coffee. And that should have been the end. A knock hit my door. "You alive in there?" The accent was pure Palermo and pure trouble. I opened it to find a man in his 30s, balancing a silver tray with coffee, toast, and a bowl of sliced pears. Blonde by Sicilian standards, broad-shouldered, with sleepy blue eyes and the expression of someone permanently offended by his own metabolism. "Paolo Greco," he said. "Driver, security. Occasional miracle worker. Myrla sent breakfast because she says you look like a woman who might faint out of spite." "I don't faint." "Excellent, then you can eat." I stepped aside. He came in, set the tray on the desk, and eyed me with open curiosity. "You are more famous than the Madonna this morning." "Wonderful." "No, terrible," he corrected. Fame in this house usually ends with a prayer card. Despite everything, a startled sound escaped me. It might have been the beginning of a laugh. Paolo brightened as if he had personally rescued civilization. "There she is, a pulse. I'm not hungry." He stared at the untouched toast like it had insulted his bloodline. "That is tragic." "Do you know what I would do for bread right now?" "Eat it," he sighed from the soles of his shoes. "I am off sugar and flour." "Why?" "Because Myrla said my face is getting soft." "Is it?" He leaned in confidentially. "She likes me." "This is how she shows it." A woman's voice barked from the corridor. "Paolo, if you flirt with the girl before she's had coffee, I'll salt your car seats." He winced. "See." Courtship. Myrla Carbone entered carrying fresh linens. She was in her 50s, square-shouldered, dark-eyed, with silver streaking her black hair and a wooden spoon still tucked through the back of her apron like a weapon she preferred. She gave me one long assessing look. "You need protein," she decided, "and less of him." "Cruel," Paolo murmured. Myrla set the linens down and lowered her voice. "The boss said you work upstairs today. South wing only. You do not wander. You do not speak to men in offices unless spoken to. If Dante asks you a question, answer it the first time. And if Paolo offers you one of his diet biscuits, throw it away." "They taste like plaster," Paolo admitted. I had noticed. There it was again, that tiny, dangerous relief of laughter, the sort that made the rest of the fear feel even sharper when it returned. Myrla's face softened a little. "Eat Cara." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed and forced down toast I could barely taste. By 10, I was polishing mirrors in the south wing. Casa Salvetor was the kind of house that wanted to be called a villa by people who had never worked inside one. 3 floors, 2 inner courtyards, black iron balconies. Marble cool enough to bite through thin soles. Oil portraits of dead men who had likely ordered worse things than anyone wrote down. There were always sounds beneath the visible ones. A radio crackling in security. The distant thud of a gate closing. Low male voices switching between Italian and Sicilian when they wanted meaning to become a private thing. I was wiping down a walnut console table when Dante stepped out of the study. No warning, just the sudden knowledge that the hallway had changed temperature. He had removed his jacket. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled to his forearms, exposing strong wrists and a watch that looked expensive enough to buy my father's old bakery twice over. My ultrasound photo was nowhere visible. That felt worse somehow. He stopped in front of me. I kept my eyes on the cloth in my hand. "You're shaking," he said. "I'm working." That isn't an answer. Neither was the truth. The truth was that every time I looked at him, I remembered rain on his mouth, and his hand splayed over my lower back like he had known exactly where loneliness lived in a woman's body. He glanced at the bowl of pears on the table beside me. "Did you eat breakfast?" I looked up then, startled by the question. Something unreadable crossed his face. "You're pale." "I'm pregnant," I said before I could stop myself. "That happens." His jaw flexed. The silence that followed was not empty. It was packed tight with unsaid things, too many of them. Finally, he held out a folded paper. My breath caught. It was the ultrasound photo. He had slipped it into a clear protective sleeve, the kind used for old documents. The crease had been pressed flat from the inside. I took it from him carefully. "Thank you." His gaze dropped to the way my fingers cupped it. "You asked me to save paper before you asked me for mercy," he said. I could not tell if he thought that made me foolish. It was all I had of the baby. And if I'd burned it, the question hit like cold water, then I would have hated you forever. Something shifted in his expression, not surprise. Recognition of a line I had not meant to draw so clearly. He stepped closer, not touching me, only using distance the way other men used threats. "You will eat in this house. You will see the doctor I choose. You will not leave the grounds without an escort. That isn't concern, that's prison. It's survival. You don't get to decide that for me." His eyes held mine. "I already did." He turned and walked away before I could answer, the authority of him lingering in the corridor like a door half shut. By lunch, I understood something I had been too frightened to name. I had not been locked in because he distrusted me. I had been kept because he had decided I mattered. And in a house like his, that was a different kind of danger. He had already decided. By the third day, I learned the rhythm of Dante Salvator's house the way a musician learns tempo by ear. Mornings belonged to the kitchen, and the chapel bells from the church 3 streets over. Afternoons belonged to business. Men in tailored coats, phones answered on the first ring, footsteps outside the study door, the heavy air of decisions made behind polished wood. Nights belonged to security sweeps, lowered voices, and the particular silence of armed men pretending to be furniture. I was folding linens in the upstairs laundry room when Myrla came in muttering violent things about her left knee. "Storm coming," she announced. "Your knee knows. My knee knows more than Paolo." "Put those down, I need hands." I followed her to the kitchen. That room was the only honest place in the villa. Copper pots, chipped ceramic bowls older than me, garlic skins, lemon zest. Burnt espresso. A radio hissing softly from the windowsill. It smelled like the kind of life that had to keep happening no matter what blood was being washed off the marble elsewhere. Myrla pointed at a tray of blood oranges. "Peel," I obeyed. After a while she said, "Paolo tells me you used to bake." I glanced up. "Paolo talks too much." "Yes, but he also listens too much." Dangerous combination. My father had a bakery. I cut away a strip of peel too hard. He lost it. She watched my hands. "And you." I learned how to make elegant things for people who thought pretty desserts could compensate for ugly lives. That made one corner of her mouth twitch. "Good. You'll fit in." By noon, I was making olive oil cake because Myrla's knee had swollen, and because keeping my hands busy was the only thing that made the house less loud inside my head. I whipped eggs and sugar until pale, folded in flour, grated orange zest so fine it perfumed the air. Topped the batter with a thin spun sugar shell that would harden glossy and fragile over soft crumb. Paolo appeared exactly as I set it in the oven. He leaned against the prep table, staring at it like a pilgrim seeing a relic. "You are crueler than the boss. You're off sugar." He pressed a hand to his chest. "That's exactly why I needed emotional support." Myrla smacked the back of his head with a dish towel. "Go stand near a treadmill and think about your sins." He turned to me on his way out. "If I die skinny, tell people I loved bravely." "Whom?" "Myrla, obviously." From the stove, Myrla said, "If you tell her, I'll poison you." Paolo sighed. "See. Passion." I laughed then, really laughed, and for 1 second the kitchen felt like my father's old bakery before debts and silence and unpaid electricity. It faded fast, because Dante walked in. He was speaking Italian into his phone, each word clipped and smooth. "No, if the shipment was watched, then the leak was internal. Find it before evening." He ended the call without looking at any of us, but the room looked at him. That was the strange thing. Even among people who loved him, or said they did, there was always that fractional stillness when he entered, like everyone's body recalculated itself around his gravity. Myrla handed him espresso. He took 1 sip. I smelled it before he finished swallowing. Not much, a thread of it, bitter almond under the roast. My whole body went cold. "Don't drink that." The words cracked across the kitchen before I could soften them. Every head turned. Dante looked at me, then at the cup in his hand. "Why?" My mouth had gone dry. "Because there's something wrong with it." Paolo was already moving. He took the cup from Dante, sniffed, and swore. "Madonna!" Security was in the room within seconds. Everything happened fast after that. The cup bagged, the kitchen cleared, Myrla furious. Paolo white around the mouth in a way that had nothing to do with his diet. Dante standing perfectly still beside the prep table while chaos formed an obedient circle around him. "Talk!" One of the guards snapped at me. I flinched. Dante didn't raise his voice. Not to her. That shut the room down harder than shouting would have. He turned to me instead. "How did you know?" "I work with flavor," I said, hating that my voice trembled now. Bitter almond where it shouldn't be, it was faint, but it was there. Cyanide? Paolo asked. Maybe something less dramatic, Myrla said, though her face had gone gray. Paolo crossed himself anyway. This house is terrible for my blood pressure. Dante's gaze stayed on me. You're sure? Yes. Something in his expression changed again, that same dangerous interest from the lower hall, only deeper now, less suspicion. More attention than I wanted, and more than a sane woman should survive. Later, after the kitchen had been scrubbed like fear could be disinfected, Myrla set a slice of the olive oil cake in front of me. The sugar shell cracked under my fork. Paolo leaned over my shoulder. What do you call it? I looked at the cake, dark gold top, tender middle, citrus bright enough to ache. Burnt orange, I said. Because, I surprised myself by answering honestly, because it looks warm before you taste the bitterness. Paolo went quiet. Even Myrla looked at me differently. I ate one bite and wanted to cry for reasons that had nothing to do with cake. That evening, I was sent upstairs with fresh towels for the guest suites. On the second-floor landing, I passed the study with the door half open and heard Dante's voice inside. I should have kept walking. Instead, I stopped at the sound of my name. She recognized poison on the first sip. A man asked, Tommaso, head of security, all gravel and scars. Yes, Dante said. And the test? A pause. Then Dante, quieter, it's mine. The towel stack shifted in my arms. I stood frozen in the hallway, heart climbing into my throat. Tommaso exhaled. Are you telling her? Not until I know who poisoned my coffee and why the timing changed the moment she entered this house. The blood seemed to leave my body all at once. Inside the study, a chair moved. I forced myself to walk before I was discovered, every step too loud on the marble, every breath sawing at my ribs. By the time I reached the linen closet, I knew two things. Dante had tested me without my knowledge, and whatever was coming for him had already started moving faster because of me. Someone was already moving. The house had a private chapel at the back of the east corridor, past two locked offices, and a sitting room no one ever sat in. I found it by accident just before sunset. Carrying fresh altar cloths Myrla insisted were older than Paolo's dignity and twice as delicate. The little chapel smelled of wax and dust and old prayer. 6 pews, marble saints, a red sanctuary lamp glowing like a watchful wound. I should have dropped the linens and left. Instead, I stood there for a minute, trying to remember what it felt like to ask for anything and mean it. My mother used to light candles when there was nothing practical left to do. Bills unpaid. My father drinking. My brother disappearing for 2 days and coming home with split knuckles and the smell of smoke on him. She would strike the match, bow her head, and say God is not a locksmith, Alina. He doesn't open doors. He just helps you survive the room. The floorboard behind me creaked. I turned too fast, my foot catching in the trailing edge of the cloth. I slipped on the top stair. I never hit the marble. A hand closed around my ankle with brutal precision. Another caught the banister above my head. I ended up half sideways, breathless, one palm scraping the stair. My skirt dragged to my knee. Dante request aborted continued. Dante's fingers tightened around my ankle for 1 sharp second. The tendons in his wrist standing out under his rolled sleeve, and then he set me upright, as if he hated the fact that he had touched me at all. My breath came in small, humiliating pieces. You keep finding new ways to fall in my house, he said. His hand was still warm around my skin. I didn't ask the stair to move. That almost smile touched his mouth again and vanished before it could become anything real. His gaze dropped to my bare ankle. A thin line of blood ran from the side of my heel where the broken edge of a votive glass had caught me. He crouched. I went still. You don't have to. Be quiet. Not cruel, not gentle either. Just final. He took a folded handkerchief from his pocket, white linen, heavy, probably worth more than every dress I owned combined, and pressed it to my heel. The chapel was silent, except for my breathing, and the little wet sound of blood hitting cloth. Up close, I could see the old pale burn scar running over the back of his right hand and disappearing beneath his cuff. Not a kitchen burn, something hotter. something that had once taken skin and patience together. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Yes. Good, you're less likely to do it again." I should have snapped at him. Instead, I watched his head, bent over my foot like something in me had slipped loose and didn't know how to climb back. The stained glass window above the altar exploded. Glass burst inward in a rain of colored shards. Dante moved before I even understood the sound. One arm wrapped my waist and hauled me down behind the last pew. His body covered mine, broad and hard and terrifyingly alive. Another shot cracked through the chapel wall. Stones spat dust over us. For half a second, all I knew was his weight, the smell of cedar and cold outside air trapped in his shirt, and the absolute stillness in him that was somehow more frightening than panic. "Stay down," he said. Boots thundered in the corridor, men shouting, a radio barking, Tommaso's voice from the doorway. "South Garden, one shooter, Paolo's circling." Dante didn't get off me. "Secure the east wing." "It's done." Only then did he shift enough to look at my face. A tiny shard of red glass had nicked my cheek. His thumb hovered near it but didn't touch. "You hit your head." "No, can you stand?" "I think so." He rose first and pulled me up by the elbow. My knees nearly betrayed me. His grip tightened just once, then released. Paolo burst into the chapel in a bulletproof vest, hair windblown, face outraged. "Good news, no one died." Bad news, I had to run, and I'm fairly certain suffering should count as a mortal wound. A laugh escaped me before I could help it. Paolo pointed at me. "See. She understands tragedy." Tommaso entered behind him, broad as a doorframe, his scarred face set in hard lines. "The shooter's dead." "Convenient," Dante said. Tommaso's gaze flicked to my cut heel, then the shattered window. "Not convenient enough." Paolo bent, picked up a piece of ruby glass and frowned at it. "Can I officially say I dislike whoever is trying to kill us, because I had white sneakers on?" "You don't own white sneakers," Tommaso said. I was thinking aspirationally. Even Dante looked briefly human at that, a shadow of dry disbelief passing over his face. Then it was gone. He turned back to me. "You're moving rooms." "What? The east corridor is exposed. You'll sleep in the suite next to mine." My whole body reacted before my mouth did. "That's ridiculous." "No," Tommaso said flatly. "It's smart. It's not safe to be near him if bullets are coming through chapel windows." Dante's eyes rested on me with that maddening dark patience. "They were already coming." Paolo rubbed his vest. "If it helps, the walls by his room are thicker. He has trust issues in marble form." "Paolo," Dante said. "I'm done speaking." He was not, but he had enough instinct for survival to retreat. Tommaso stepped closer to me while Dante studied the broken window. "Listen carefully," he said, low enough to keep the words between us. "Men will come at him through anything soft, doors, old loyalties, women they think he'll bleed for. If you have a secret that can hurt him, now is the time to decide which side of it you're on." The warning landed where it hurt because I already knew what secret he meant. Before I could answer, Dante turned back. "Doctor, now. I cut my heel, not a limb." "Pocket." The word stopped me colder than the gunfire had. He must have seen the question in my face, because his expression sharpened a fraction. "You carry your life in one pocket and look at anyone who reaches for it like you'll bite." It fits. It was not affectionate. If anything, it sounded like a private diagnosis, a marking. Still, I felt it. "Dante, now." He walked me from the chapel with one hand at my back, not quite touching, the heat of him there anyway. Men moved aside in the corridor before he asked. That was his real language. Space given without request. Fear shaped into obedience. The house doctor cleaned the cut, declared me difficult and alive, and left me with my heel bandaged and my pulse in ruins. Later, when the suite next to Dante's had swallowed me whole with its dark wood furniture and balcony overlooking the inner courtyard, I stood at the dresser, trying to unpin my hair with shaking fingers. A knock sounded once. I opened the door to find him there. No jacket, white shirt changed, a faint line of plaster dust still clinging near one cuff. He held out the same linen handkerchief, now washed but permanently stained pink at one corner. "You dropped it," he said. I took it carefully. Our fingers brushed. That was all, barely anything. And yet the air tightened between us as if the room had remembered we were once two strangers in the rain with very poor judgment. His gaze went to my mouth, stayed 1 second too long. Then he stepped back. "Sleep," he said, "and keep your secrets where I can reach them, Pocket." The door closed softly. That was worse. The next morning began with Basil, rain, and a black sedan waiting under the front portico. No one told me where we were going until I was already inside the car. Paolo drove. Tommaso sat in front with his shoulders set like an argument. Dante took the seat beside me in silence, one hand on his knee, the other resting near the door as if he needed both exits and restraint within easy reach. I folded my hands over the protective sleeve in my coat pocket. The papery rasp was softer now, cushioned by plastic, but I still heard it every time I moved. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To the doctor," Dante said. "I have a doctor." "Had. You don't get to replace my life one appointment at a time." Paolo, eyes on the road, murmured, "He actually does this with everyone." Control is his love language. Mine is carbohydrates. Tommaso muttered, "Drive." "I am driving." The city slid by in wet gray bands. Palermo in rain looked older, more honest. Laundry between balconies. Church domes darkened by weather. Market awnings snapping in the wind. I kept my gaze on the window, because it was easier than looking at the man beside me and remembering the shape of his body over mine in the chapel. The clinic was private, discreet, expensive enough to smell like polished wood instead of antiseptic. They took us through a side entrance. That was when I understood two things at once. First, Dante had done this before. The staff recognized his kind of power without needing a name. Second, something in the nurse's face changed when she looked from me to him, not curiosity. Recognition, she tried to hide it, failed. "Signor Salvator," she said, "the doctor is ready." She did not ask who I was. In the exam room, pale blue walls and framed watercolor lemons made a poor attempt at comfort. The ultrasound machine stood by the bed like a promise I had not consented to share. The technician smiled at me with professional softness. "How far along did your last scan estimate?" 12 weeks, she nodded. "We'll confirm." Dante stayed by the window until she dimmed the lights. Then he stepped closer, drawn by something he clearly hated needing. Cold gel, probe, static crackle, and then there, a blur. A curve, a pulse, the room filled with the tiny, rapid thrum of a heartbeat. I had heard it once before, but alone. Alone was one kind of pain. Hearing it beside him was another. My eyes stung before I could stop them. The technician pointed at the screen. "Strong cardiac activity." I looked at the image. Dante looked at me. He should have been watching the monitor. Instead, he watched my face as if my reaction told him more than the machine ever could. "Would you like a printout?" the technician asked. "Yes," I whispered. Dante said nothing. Afterward, while I cleaned the gel from my skin, he stepped into the hallway to take a call. The door did not shut all the way. I heard only pieces. "No, I want names, not excuses, then pull the port records again." When I came out, a woman in a cream coat brushed past me too fast and dropped an envelope at my feet. No one else seemed to notice. My pulse kicked. I bent, picked it up, and saw my name written in my brother's slanted hand. Elena, no stamp, no address, just my name. I slid it into my bag before Tommaso turned. The guilt came instantly, hot and stupid and complete. Back in the car, I waited until we were moving before opening it under the shield of my coat. Nico's handwriting shook across the paper. "Don't trust the old men around him. I took something I shouldn't have. Cesar knows I'm alive. If he learns about the baby, run, burn this." My blood went cold. At the bottom was a key taped flat to the page. Small, brass, locker key maybe. I stared at it until the letters blurred. "What is it?" Dante's voice cut clean through me. I looked up too slowly. His eyes had already gone hard. "Nothing," he held out his hand. "No, Pocket," that word again, sharper now, a warning with my pulse wrapped around it. "It's private. In my car, while someone is trying to poison and shoot through windows, nothing is private." I should have given it to him. Instead, I folded the note once, shoved it deeper into my bag, and said the unforgivable thing. "It's my family, you don't get to own that too." The silence that followed was terrible. Paolo's hands tightened on the wheel. Tommaso looked straight ahead, as if staring at the windshield could make him deaf. Dante did not raise his voice. That made my skin go colder than shouting would have. "Stop the car!" We were on a narrow lane by the old marina. Paolo braked. Dante got out, came around, and opened my door himself. Rain touched the edge of the leather seat. "Out!" I stared at him. "Here! Out!" I obeyed because the steel in his face gave me nothing else. Rain needled my hair and coat. The sea beyond the stone wall churned black. He held his hand out again. "Last chance, Alina." My fingers shook as I gave him the envelope. He read it once, then again, slower. When he reached the name at the center of it, something in his stillness sharpened into violence so controlled it was almost elegant. "Cesare." He handed the note to Tommaso through the open door. "Trace the drop route, every camera from clinic to alley." Tommaso nodded once and was already on his phone. I stood in the rain with my face burning. "You knew my brother?" I asked. "No, but you know the name." His gaze pinned mine. "Everyone in my world knows Cesare Marchetti." The name meant nothing and everything. One of the old men around him. Nico's warning scraped under my ribs. "I was going to tell you." When I understood what it meant. He took one step closer. Rain darkened his shirt at the shoulders. "You came into my house carrying a child and a lie. You hid a brother in trouble, a note in your bag, and a key you haven't explained. I was trying to protect my family." He laughed once without warmth. "That sentence has buried more people than bullets." Something in me broke loose then. "You think I wanted any of this? I was going to tell you about the baby. My voice failed. "I needed to know you were real first, not a mistake. Not a night I'd invented because I was lonely." For the first time since the chapel, his expression changed in a way I felt rather than understood. He looked away, just once. And in that one movement, I knew I had touched something raw. When he faced me again, his voice was lower. "There's something you should have been told sooner." My breath snagged. He reached into his coat and handed me a folded sheet from the clinic. Official letterhead, date from 2 days earlier. I read the line once and then again because my eyes would not accept it. "Paternity probability, 99.98%. The world tilted. "You already knew," I said. He did not deny it. "You already knew," I repeated, and this time it came out like hurt. "I needed certainty. You tested me. I tested the blood on the glass from your cheek after the chapel." The cruelty of his efficiency stunned me more than if he had shouted. I took one step back. Then another. "Don't," he said. But I had already turned away, rain in my mouth, my throat, my eyes, not running, nowhere to run to. Just needing distance from the man who had looked at my face, while our child's heart beat on a screen, and kept that certainty folded inside him like another weapon. Behind me, Dante said my name once. I kept walking. By the time he caught my arm, betrayal had a face. I jerked free of his hand on instinct. He let me. That hurt more. We stood under the rain by the marina wall, the sea throwing salt into the air. Dante a dark shape in a dark coat with my anger reflected nowhere in him except the white tension around his mouth. "You had no right," I said. "No." The answer landed so cleanly it knocked the next words out of me. He went on before I could recover. "But rights are a luxury where I live. Certainty is not. You could have told me." "Yes, why didn't you?" That was when I saw it, that flicker of damage behind the control, not enough to make him softer. Just enough to prove the iron had once been flesh. "Because once I said it aloud," he said, "it became something men could use." The rain ran off his lashes. He did not wipe it away. "I am not something men could use." "No," he said quietly, "you're exactly why they'll try." Paolo rolled down his window 3 inches. "I don't mean to interrupt whatever heartbreak and homicide scene this is, but Tommaso says we need to move." He found the clinic camera gap. "Someone killed power to one corridor for 40 seconds. Dante opened my door. I hated that I wanted to refuse him more than I actually could. "Get in." I did. No one spoke on the drive back. That evening, I learned the first thing about living near a man like Dante. Anger did not make me stop noticing him. If anything, it sharpened the details. The way he stood with one shoulder to the fire in the study, never fully relaxed. The roughness in his voice after too many commands. The fact that he removed his watch before washing blood from his knuckles, as if time deserved protection more than skin did. The second thing I learned came after sunset, when I found the brass key from Nico's note missing from my bag. I stormed to Dante's study without knocking. He looked up from a ledger. Tommaso was at the sideboard. Paolo sat in a chair eating fennel raw because apparently misery required garnish. "You took it," Dante said nothing. "The key," still nothing. Paolo crunched thoughtfully. "This is why I tell women not to leave valuables around suspiciously capable men." Tommaso looked tired enough to age in front of us. I planted both hands on Dante's desk. "Give it back." He rose in a single controlled movement that made the room feel smaller. "No, it belongs to my brother. It may belong to the man trying to reach you through him. You don't know that." "No," he said. "Which is why we opened the locker first." The floor seemed to drop from under me. Tommaso set a file on the desk. Inside was a ledger page, 3 passports, and one photograph of Cesare Marchetti shaking hands with a Russian man outside a warehouse at the port. My mouth went dry. "Nico stole records," Dante said. "Not money. You found him." "No, we found what he left." That should have relieved me. Instead, terror pooled lower in my body, heavy as lead. "Then he's still out there." "Yes. And if Cesare has him," Dante's jaw flexed, "then your brother has been dead to him since he took that page." I stared at the ledger numbers without seeing them. Paolo cleared his throat softly. "For what it's worth, your brother had nerve. Stupid nerve, but still." "You are helping exactly 0, Tommaso muttered. "I'm keeping morale alive." Dante came around the desk, not close enough to touch, too close for me to ignore. "Listen carefully," he said. "You made a mistake keeping this from me. It nearly cost us the chance to understand the board we're playing on." Heat climbed my face. "I know." The admission tasted like failure. His gaze stayed on mine. "And still, if Cesare thinks he can use your brother to get to you, he will." A beat, then another. "I want to see the locker," I said. "No, you opened my brother's secret without me, and I'd do it again." Something reckless rose in me. "I hate you when you do that." The room went utterly still. Dante looked at my mouth. For one mad second, I thought he might kiss me out of fury, out of memory, out of the impossible current that had been sparking itself raw between us since the chapel. Instead, he stepped back. That was the first time he stopped. "Go upstairs," he said. I didn't move. "Dante, go upstairs." I went because if I hadn't, I might have done something humiliating like reach for him. The ambush came an hour later. I was on the roof terrace outside my room, gulping cold night air, and trying to arrange my thoughts into something less dangerous than wanting a man I should have feared cleanly. When the lights in the courtyard snapped out. 1 second of black, then gunfire, men shouting below, glass breaking, the metallic scream of the rear gate forced too fast. I turned toward the door at the exact moment a masked man stepped out of the dark beside the ivy wall. He grabbed my wrist. I bit him hard enough to taste blood. He swore, shoved me back, and raised a gun. Dante hit him from the side like a bullet given human form. They went down together, bone against stone. The gun skidded across the terrace. Dante got one brutal punch in before the man reached for a knife. I saw the blade flash, saw it disappear into the dark line of Dante's jacket near his ribs. The sound I made did not feel human. Dante broke the man's wrist and slammed his head into the wall once. Efficient. Final. Then he kicked the knife away and turned to me with blood already spreading under his hand. "Inside," he said. "I'm not leaving you." "Inside, Alina." "No." That seemed to reach him somewhere strange. He stared at me for one raw second, breathing hard. Then he crossed the distance and took my face in both hands. It was the first time he touched me like he wanted to remember the shape. "Look at me," he said. I did. His thumb trembled once against my cheek, barely there. "This is what I am." The confession was not verbal. It was his blood in the dark, the body at his feet. The fact that even wounded, he had looked for me first. Below us, Paolo shouted, "If anyone asks, I heroically stayed alive." Tommaso roared an order from the courtyard. Dante leaned his forehead to mine. That was the second time he stopped. When he pulled back, something in his control had already burned through. He kissed me. Not hard, not greedy. Worse. Slow enough to ask, brief enough to spare. His mouth was rain and blood and restraint fraying at the edges. I made a sound against him I had never made before because it wasn't desire exactly. It was recognition, fear, relief, everything I had been trying not to know. He broke the kiss first. I should not have done that. Then don't apologize. His eyes shut once hard. When they opened, there was no room left in them for self-deception. "Do you know why?" he said, voice rougher than I had ever heard it. "Because you were afraid, and still the first thing you ever protected from me was a piece of paper. Because when any sane person would have begged for herself, you begged for something small enough to crease. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about that since the moment it happened." My breath caught. The terrace door burst open behind him. "War's here," Tommaso said. Dante stepped away from me and became himself again, or the version the world was allowed to survive. But the blood at his side was real. And so was the kiss. War sounded less like gunfire than I expected. Gunfire came and went. War stayed. It lived in the extra men at the gates. On the way, Paolo slept with his phone in his hand and a pistol under the couch cushion while insisting he was practicing tactical napping. In fact, Myrla cooked for 30 every night and still counted the chairs before she sat down. Tommaso's silence grew heavier by the hour. Dante's wound was not deep enough to kill him. That, apparently, was all the permission he needed to keep moving. By the third day after the terrace attack, I was furious enough to speak to him only when absolutely necessary and frightened enough to check whether he was breathing every time the house went too quiet. He noticed both. He said nothing. That was its own punishment. The first time I saw the bruise darkening under the dressing at his ribs, he was changing his shirt with his back, half turned to me in the private sitting room outside his study. I had come to bring coffee because Myrla's knee was bad and because I had made the mistake of caring whether he'd eaten. His body bore history badly and beautifully. Old scars, new stitches. The burn mark I had seen on his hand echoed in a pale pull of skin along his side. He took the cup from me without comment. I smelled it automatically. His mouth shifted. "You do that every time. You almost died, so now you audit my espresso. I audit everything." "That," he said, "I believe." The almost smile was back. God help me, so was the wanting. Before I could answer, Tommaso appeared in the doorway. There was blood on his collar, not his. "Port Warehouse," he said. "We found one of Cesar's runners." Too late for questions. Dante set the coffee down untouched. Tommaso's gaze flicked to me. "And there's more. A package came through the service gate, for Alina." Ice spread through my limbs. The package was on the kitchen table when we reached it. Brown paper. Twine. No note. Paolo hovered at a distance as if comedy alone could not save him from this one. "Maybe it's pastries," he offered weakly. No one looked at him. Dante cut the string with a knife. Inside was Nico's ring, and a blood-stiff strip of cloth from one of his shirts. I sat down before my knees gave out. Myrla came to my side, so quickly I nearly cried at the touch of her rough hand on my shoulder. "There's no body," Tommaso said carefully. "No proof he's dead." "No," Dante said. "Just proof Cesar wants her to think it." I stared at the ring in Dante's palm. My brother wore it on a chain when our father sold the bakery ovens. Said metal stayed when everything else burned. "Get out," I whispered. The kitchen emptied except for Myrla. When I finally spoke again, my voice sounded scraped hollow. "This is my fault." "No," she said. "I brought it in. You brought yourself to the only house in Palermo with a chance of keeping you alive." Her thumb rubbed my shoulder once, a mothering gesture so quiet it broke something in me. "That's not a sin." But when I looked up and saw Dante in the doorway, all I could feel was the widening shape of damage around him. men dead, windows shattered. My brother somewhere between alive and used. A child inside me who had done nothing to deserve his father's enemies. That night Dante came to my room carrying an envelope and a passport. The sight of them made me cold all over. "You're leaving tomorrow," he said. I laughed once because otherwise I might have screamed. "Now you let me go. This is not permission." "It's strategy." He set the documents on the table. Naples, new name, convent-owned guest house on the coast. Enough money tucked inside the passport to buy 10 versions of the life I'd lost, and none of the one I'd already ruined. "You're sending me away. I'm keeping our child alive." The words hit too deep to argue with cleanly. "What about you?" His face changed by 1 degree, which was more than most men ever saw. "That isn't the part you control." I wanted to tell him I hated him again. Instead, what came out was worse. "I don't want to leave you with this." The silence turned soft and unbearable. He crossed the room, close enough that I could see the tiny cut healing near his jaw from the terrace fight. His hand lifted, stopped near my cheek and dropped. Third time he stopped. "If you stay," he said, voice low, "you stay knowing exactly what my world costs. Not the idea of it, not the stories, this." His gaze flicked once to the ring on my desk. I looked at the ferry ticket, then at him, then at the old life those papers pretended could still be mine. At dawn Paolo drove me to the port. He talked the whole way, because he was trying not to look sorry for me. Mostly about how fasting made him mean, and how Myrla had threatened to marry a butcher just to teach him humility. And how if I met any saintly nuns in Naples, I should ask whether one of them wanted a deeply misunderstood Sicilian with excellent parking skills. I laughed once, then cried hard enough that I had to turn my face to the window. At the dock, he loaded my suitcase and stepped back. "For what it's worth," he said, hands in his pockets, "he didn't sleep." I pressed my lips together. "That isn't worth anything." "No," Paolo said softly. "I didn't think so either." The ferry horn sounded. I took 3 steps toward the gangway. Then I saw a child in a yellow raincoat tug his mother's hand, and she bent automatically to smooth the paper ticket he had crushed in his fist before helping him climb aboard. Fragility first. Always, the thought hit me like a hand between my shoulders. I looked at the sea, at the ferry, at the life I could still choose. Then I pictured Dante alone in that house, bleeding himself into war so our child might live, and understood with terrible clarity that leaving would not make me innocent again. It would only make me absent. I turned around. Paolo stared. "Madonna, I'm not going." He blinked twice. "You are aware this is the worst decision for my stress levels." "I know. You also know he's going to look at me like I personally failed the concept of transportation." "I know." A pause. Then he took my suitcase back out of the trunk and muttered, "One day I'm opening a gelato stand in a city with no gunfire." When I walked back into Casa Salvetor under the noon sun, every guard at the gate looked at me as if I were either brave or deranged. Maybe I was both. Dante met me in the lower hall where it had all started. His face gave me nothing, only the small, hard stillness of a man who had already cut himself open and locked it shut again. "I told you to leave," he said. I set the unused ticket on the table between us. "I know. Why are you here?" Because I was afraid of him once, and now I was afraid of what it meant that leaving hurt more. Because the danger had moved inside me. Because choosing him would cost everything, and I had chosen anyway. Instead, I said the only true thing I had strength for. "Because I walked away," I whispered, "and it felt worse than staying." He closed his hand over the ticket and did not let go. If returning to Dante's house felt like stepping willingly into fire, the strange thing was how little regret survived once I did it. Fear remained. So did anger. So did the sick knowledge that my choice had burned the bridge back to anything resembling ordinary. But regret? No, that frightened me most. The house had changed by the time I came back from the port. More men, fewer lights at night, Tommaso's orders short enough to cut skin, a second gate reinforced. The chapel window boarded over with raw wood that smelled green and newly split. And Dante, Dante became gentler in ways only someone watching too closely would have noticed. A chair appearing before I asked to sit. Fruit cut on a plate because morning nausea still came like punishment. Doors opened before I reached them. Distance kept where touch would have been easy. He did not apologize for what he was. He simply moved as if my safety had become his first language. That should have made things simpler. It did not. On the second night after I returned, Myrla pulled me into the pantry beside the kitchen and shut the door with her hip. Shelves of tomatoes, flour, olive oil, jars of capers, the air cool and close. "You made him human for 10 minutes today," she said. I blinked. "What?" He thanked a man for moving a crate. Dante doesn't thank furniture. Despite everything, I smiled. Myrla folded her arms. "Don't confuse care with peace, girl." "There's no peace yet." "I know." She studied me with those dark, practical eyes. "Then know this too, men like him aren't softened by love. They're endangered by it." Before I could answer, a crash sounded in the courtyard. Shouting followed. Tommaso appeared in the kitchen doorway a moment later, bloodless and furious. "Where is she?" Myrla shoved me behind her as if she could still mother the world into behaving. "I'm here." Tommaso exhaled hard. "Stay in sight, Matteo's missing." "Who's Matteo?" I asked. Myrla and Tommaso exchanged a look that told me I should already have known. I met him an hour later. Matteo Rinaldi arrived through the side gate with his tie askew, wire-rim glasses crooked. A bruise darkening under one eye, and 3 folders clutched to his chest, as if paperwork alone had kept him alive. Dante's cousin by marriage, Paolo told me later, the family accountant, the only man in the house who could make tax law sound like tragedy. "I was delayed, not dead," Matteo said to Tommaso with mild irritation. "You missed 4 check-ins. My phone was taken." "By whom?" Matteo gave a thin, tired smile. "Men with no respect for spreadsheets." Paolo muttered, "Animals." Matteo noticed me then. His expression softened. "You must be Alina," I nodded. He reached into his briefcase and produced a bottle of prenatal vitamins. "The pharmacy sent the wrong brand," I argued. "This is the better one." Something in my throat tightened unexpectedly. "Thank you, you're welcome." His gaze flicked to Dante. "He worries like a criminal and orders like a nun." Paolo choked, laughing. Even Geno's mouth almost moved. For one thin hour, with Matteo sorting ledgers at the kitchen table, Myrla cursing the stove, and Paolo staging a dramatic farewell to bread because he had fallen off the wagon with a cannolo, and now there was no point in virtue. The house felt human again. That was probably why I made the mistake. When the note came tucked under the pantry door just after midnight, I knew at once it was meant for me. Locker 17, Bakery District. "Come alone if you want your brother alive." No signature, no time to think well, only enough time to think like a sister. I took a flashlight, shoes, and the key. I did not tell Dante. The Bakery District at night smelled like old yeast and diesel. My father's lost world, if you stripped out the warmth and left only cement and shutters. Locker 17 sat in the back corridor of an abandoned supply warehouse. Rusted metal, flickering strip light, my pulse so loud it blurred the edges of the room. I fit the key. The door opened. Inside was not my brother. Inside was Matteo. And behind me the warehouse door slammed shut. I turned too fast. He had taken off his glasses. Without them, he looked older and colder and nothing like the gentle man who brought vitamins. "I'm sorry," he said. I stared at him. "You," his face tightened. If apology fixed anything, accountants would rule the earth. Something moved behind the lockers, 2 armed men stepping from shadow. My hand went instinctively to my stomach. Matteo saw it. Looked away. "Cesare only wants leverage," he said. "You and the child will be kept alive." The betrayal was so clean it almost felt unreal. "You sat in her kitchen." "Yes, you looked at me and saw a woman I was sorry to ruin." That nearly undid me. "Why?" His laugh broke strangely. "Because Dante thinks he can modernize a kingdom built by older wolves. Because men like Cesare taught us all how to survive, and then he decided survival should belong to those willing to keep paying its real price. By killing women," Matteo flinched. the crack. You don't know what happened before you came. No, I said. I know what's happening now. One of the men grabbed my arm. I drove my heel into his shin and twisted the way Tommaso had once showed me in the courtyard when he was supposedly testing staff awareness. The move bought me half a second, no more. Enough to wrench free and knock over a crate of glass bottles stacked beside the wall. They shattered. The sharp smell of almond extract burst into the air. The whole room froze. My own talent betrayed me first. Bitter almond, not perfume, not baking. Poison. I saw the men glance at each other. Saw one reach toward a rag over his nose. Gas line sabotage and cyanide mix, crude, stupid, fast. They're going to kill us too, I said. Matteo's face changed, because he understood I was right. I snatched the flashlight, smashed the exposed bulb overhead, and plunged the corridor into dark. Men shouted. Someone fired blind. I ran the only direction I could, through shelves, past sacks of stale flour, into a cold storage pantry at the far end. The door locked from the outside. Of course it did. I hit it once with both palms. Hard, useless. My breathing turned white in the cold room. In the darkness, I could hear my child only in memory, the tiny machine-made gallop of a heart. Okay, I whispered to no one, to both of us. Okay. Outside, footsteps pounded, men yelling. Then another sound rose through the walls and floor, distant but unmistakable. Gunfire, not random. Approaching, I slid down the door and wrapped both arms around my stomach, the cold biting through my coat. The traitor had my name, and Dante was coming. Cold changes time. Inside the locked pantry, minutes stretched thin and metallic. My toes went numb first, then my fingers. I kept moving them because stillness felt too much like surrender. Somewhere beyond the steel door, men shouted in bursts. A gunshot cracked, then another. Then silence so sudden it felt staged. I looked around by the weak beam of my dropped flashlight. Shelves. Industrial mixers draped in plastic. Sacks of flour split at one seam. A vent near the ceiling. A delivery hatch bolted from the outside. I forced my breathing slower. Panic would not open doors. Tommaso had once told me, while pretending to demonstrate exit routes and actually threatening Paolo into paying attention, that every storage room had two truths. Where the cold came from and where a lazy worker cheated it. I found the coolant line first, then the maintenance panel at floor level behind the lowest rack. 3 screws. I had no screwdriver, I had a bobby pin. Come on, I whispered, metal against metal. Numb fingers, 1 screw, 2. The third stripping halfway and making me want to scream. I kept going. When the panel came free, cold air punched harder through the gap. The crawl space beyond was barely wider than my shoulders. I thought of the baby, of dirt under my knees. Of how absurd it was that a woman could be brought to this. Pregnant, hunted, shivering inside a warehouse, because men with expensive watches treated tenderness like a weakness to be exploited. Then I thought of Dante's face when I came back from the ferry. I went in. By the time I wriggled out behind stacked flour sacks in the main prep room, gunpowder clogged the air. White dust floated everywhere, coating the floor, the counters, the dark suits of 3 dead men. I rose too fast and nearly slipped. A hand caught my arm. I gasped, then saw Paolo. His hair was white with flour. His vest was dusted to match. There was blood on his sleeve that didn't seem to be his, and outrage in his face that was entirely his own. Thank the saints, he breathed. Do you know what I went through to find you? I crawled. Elena, I am a dignified man. I made a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. He looked behind me. Can you run? Yes. Excellent, do not make me carry you. Tommaso says I lift with my back. A body moved across the room with lethal certainty. Dante. I knew him before my eyes adjusted because men around him bent around his violence the way grass bends under wind. He shot once, twice. A third man dropped. Dante did not pause to admire the damage. He was already turning, already searching. His gaze found me. Everything in him stopped. Not his body, not his alertness, just the part that had been moving without soul attached. Then he crossed the room. He took my face in both hands so hard it almost hurt and looked everywhere at once. My mouth, my eyes, my coat, the shape of my body as if injury might still be hiding in it. Are you hurt? No, tell me the truth. I'm cold. That was all it took. He pulled me against him, no finesse, no audience-safe restraint. Just both arms wrapping around me with the desperation of a man who had already buried too much. Flour streaked his jacket. Blood marked one cuff. His heart hit against my cheek like a fist. I held on. It was not pretty. It was not graceful. It was the rawest thing I had ever done. Over his shoulder, I saw Matteo on his knees near the loading dock, Tommaso's gun on him, his glasses shattered beside a crate. Alive, bruised, crying without sound. Dante let me go only enough to look at my face again. You left the house alone. The words were quiet, lethal. I know, you could have died. I know, you do not get to make me live that twice. I stared at him. The meaning hit so hard I forgot the cold. Twice. Giulia. Before I could ask, Tommaso barked, movement. A figure stepped from the office above the prep room, hands visible, expression composed. Cesare Marchetti was older than I expected. 60s, silver hair, dark overcoat, no hurry at all. The sort of man who would have looked respectable in daylight to people who mistook stillness for morality. His eyes went first to Dante. Then to me. Then to my stomach. And for the first time in all this, I felt a hatred so clean it steadied me. Dante, he said almost kindly. You always were faster than your father. Dante pushed me behind him. Cesare smiled faintly. And there it is, the mistake. Paolo muttered, I hate old people with posture. Tommaso almost smiled. Almost, Matteo bowed his head like a man waiting for judgment. Dante's voice dropped into something colder than anger. You used my child, Cesare shrugged once. I removed a vulnerability before. I was right then too. The room tipped. Not grief, recognition. He had done it. Somehow, some years ago, before me, he had done it. Dante did not speak. That frightened me more than if he had shouted. Cesare went on, as if confession was merely another ledger to balance. Giulia made you soft. Pregnant women make men believe in futures they have not secured. I spared you a worse death. The silence that followed was alive with murder. I did not know I was moving until I heard my own voice. You call that sparing? Every eye shifted. Cesare looked at me with bored curiosity, as if I had interrupted men speaking about land. And you must be the maid. I stepped around Dante before he could stop me. My hands were shaking, but my voice held. No, I said. I'm the woman who heard poison in his coffee because your people are sloppy. I'm the woman your men, locked in a freezer, because you needed leverage to feel large. And if you think a child is a weakness, it's because no one ever trusted you with anything fragile. The room went still. Dante looked at me like he had never seen me clearly before. Cesare's face changed first. Not much, enough. There were men who feared guns. There were men who feared shame. He was the second kind. A shot rang out from the far mezzanine. Tommaso jerked, blood blooming across his shoulder, and went down to one knee. Everything exploded. Paolo grabbed me. Dante moved toward Cesare. Matteo screamed something, warning or regret, I never knew. More shots. Flour bursting from torn sacks into white clouds that turned the whole room ghostly. Paolo shoved me behind a steel table. If I die before eating pasta again, haunt everyone. I clutched the edge so hard my nails hurt. Above the chaos, Dante's voice cut through once, hoarse and absolute. Get her out! I looked up in time to see him going after Cesare through the white storm of flour and gun smoke, as if the only thing left in the world worth killing for had already been chosen. And I knew, with the cold certainty that only love can produce, that one of us might not survive what came next. Tommaso's blood on the warehouse floor made the rest of the room move too fast and too slow at once. Paolo hauled him behind the steel prep table, while bullets ricocheted off tile and metal around us. Tommaso cursed in a low, concentrated stream that reassured me more than silence would have. Through and through, Paolo said after one look. You'll live just to insult me longer. Tragic, Tommaso bit out. Above us, the mezzanine thudded with footsteps. Cesare's men were retreating deeper into the building toward the old cannery corridor that backed onto the port. Dante had already gone after them. Every instinct in me screamed to follow. Every practical fact said I would be slower, softer, easier to use. Then Tommaso gripped my wrist with his uninjured hand. "You hear better than most." "What do you smell?" The question was so unexpected I almost missed the answer. Under flour and gunpowder and rusted machinery, oil, sharp, industrial, too much of it, I lifted my head. The old cannery line still ran on emergency power. I could hear the conveyor clicking somewhere down the hall. And if oil had been spread, "They're setting the floor to burn," I said. Tommaso's eyes narrowed. "Cesare knows Dante will corner him close," Paolo swore. "Of course he does." "Why have one murder method when you can diversify?" Tommaso pushed himself higher against the table leg, face white. "There's a cut-off valve in the boiler room, east corridor." "Red wheel." "I'll go," I said. "No," Paolo and Tommaso said together. I looked toward the cannery hall where shots were still echoing. "If that line catches, everyone in there burns." Tommaso's jaw worked once. He hated the logic because it was right. Paolo pointed at me with blood on his sleeve. "If you die saving men who do not meal prep, I will be furious in the afterlife." "I'm not dying." That's exactly what people say right before a deeply upsetting montage. I squeezed his hand once in passing and ran. The east corridor was lined with dead conveyor belts, cracked labels, and the stale ghost smell of tomatoes packed decades earlier. My shoes skidded on flour. The baby shifted low in my body as if reminding me I was not only one life anymore. Boiler room. Red wheel. I found it through heat and noise. The pipe beside it rattled violently. Oil smells stronger here. One spark from the firefight could turn the whole section into an oven. The wheel would not move. I braced both hands and pulled. Nothing. I thought of my father teaching me to wrench stuck mixer gears loose with a dish towel and bad language. I wrapped my coat hem around the spoke and put my weight into it. It shrieked. Moved. Another quarter turn. Another. The rattling dropped to a groan. From the far corridor came one clear gunshot. Then silence. My heart stopped doing sensible things. I ran back. The cannery floor opened wide and ugly before me, rusted vats, hanging chains, a line of smashed windows facing the black water beyond the port. Smoke drifted low. Two of Cesare's men lay motionless near the loading door. Matteo was on the ground against a pillar, bleeding from the leg, alive and staring at nothing. And at the center of it, Dante and Cesare stood 5 feet apart. No guns, just knives. Dante's suit jacket hung torn. Blood darkened his side again. Cesare had lost his overcoat and one cufflink, but his posture remained insultingly elegant, as if murder were still a social skill. "You came back," Dante said without looking at me. He knew I was there anyway. Cesare's mouth twitched. "And there is the problem in one sentence." Dante advanced. Cesare slashed. Dante blocked. Metal kissed metal with a sound that made my teeth hurt. They moved like men who knew each other's habits too well. Student and teacher, future and warning, that was the true ugliness of it. Cesare had helped make him. "You think love changes the arithmetic," Cesare said as they circled. "It only adds names to the grave." Dante's voice was almost calm. "No, it gives me one." The fight ended fast after that. Too fast for mercy. Cesare fainted high, went low. Dante let the blade skim his forearm, took the hit, stepped inside the older man's guard, and drove his own knife in under the ribs with one brutal, efficient movement. Cesare froze. For a second, no one breathed. Dante held him there, close enough for the last words to remain private. I didn't hear them. I only saw the change in Cesare's face. Not repentance, not exactly. But the dawning recognition that he had built his whole life around survival and still died, because he misunderstood what could make a man unstoppable. Dante let him fall. The knife hit concrete once. Matteo began to sob. Tommaso and Paolo arrived seconds later, Paolo pale at the sight, Tommaso pressed white-knuckled to his own wound. No one cheered. No one said thank God. Men like ours did not confuse endings with absolution. Dante turned to me. There was blood on his hands, flour on one shoulder. Something emptied out in his eyes that hurt to see. I crossed the floor before anyone could stop me. When I reached him, I did not care who watched. I took his face between my palms the way he had taken mine. His skin was cold despite the heat in the building. My own hands shook. "It's done," I whispered. He looked at me as if the words belonged to a language he had forgot. Behind us, Mateo choked out, "He had my son." We all turned. He was crying openly now, glasses gone, ruin made plain. Cesar had my son's school route. I gave him numbers, schedules, staff access. God forgive me, not because I believed him, because I was weak. Tommaso closed his eyes once. The confession did not save him. It did not damn him more than he already was. It simply made the ugliness complete. Dante said nothing. He stepped past me, picked up Cesar's fallen coat, and from its inner pocket withdrew a folded photograph scorched at one corner. He handed it to me. Giulia, young, smiling. One hand over a barely visible swell under her coat. On the back, in faded ink, 20 weeks next Tuesday. Don't let work steal this too. My vision blurred. When I looked up, Dante was staring at the water through the broken window, not hiding grief, not displaying it, bearing it the way other men bore weather. I went to him anyway. The sea outside slapped black against pilings. Somewhere beyond the cannery, a gull cried into the smoke. I slipped my hand into his. He looked down as if he had forgotten hands could be offered without demand. This time he took mine back, not because he was wounded, not because we were alone. Because there was nothing left between us that could survive another lie. Tommaso's voice came rough from behind us. "Fire, S contained." "Port's ours," Paolo, quieter than I had ever heard him, said. "No more movement." Dante closed his eyes once. When he opened them, they were not lighter, just clearer. "It is over," he said. And for the first time, I believed him. War ended without elegance. No violins, no citywide sigh of relief. Just paperwork, funerals, men reassigned, shipments rerouted, blood scrubbed from places designed to hold other stains. Tommaso healed slowly and complained like it was a profession. Mateo vanished into an arrangement I was never told in detail. Alive, guarded, permanently exiled from any room Dante truly trusted. Cesar was buried quietly, which somehow felt crueler than spectacle. What came after was stranger than fear. Peace, when you had expected death, made ordinary things feel indecently bright. Lemons on the counter, fresh sheets, church bells without gunfire under them. 3 weeks after the cannery. I stood barefoot in the kitchen at dawn making orange marmalade, because sleep had become a shallow, unreliable thing, and because sugar obeyed heat better than people ever would. Myrla leaned on a stool issuing commands she did not need to issue. "Lower flame, not that low." "You stir like a woman with thoughts." "I am a woman with thoughts. That's why I worry." Paolo wandered in wearing gym clothes no one respected and reached for a spoonful. Myrla slapped his wrist with a wooden spoon. "Touch that and I'll break your fingers. I need energy. You need discipline." He looked at me tragically. "You see. We are star-crossed." From the doorway, Dante said, "She'd have to be a star first." Paolo clutched his heart. "Boss, in front of the pregnant woman." I turned. Dante had lost none of his danger. That would have been a lie too easy to tell. He still carried the room with him when he entered it. Men still quieted. Doors still seemed to decide themselves around him. But something in him had eased where I was concerned, the way a blade remains sharp while no longer pointed at your throat. His gaze dropped to the spoon in my hand. "You should sit. I'm stirring fruit, not lifting furniture. You were on your feet yesterday, too," Paolo grinned. "He's been reading pregnancy books like witness statements." Dante gave him a look. Paolo raised both hands. "I value my life, mostly." Myrla shoved a plate of ricotta toast at me. "Eat." I did, because the first week after the cannery, I had learned something humbling. Being cared for could feel almost as exposing as being touched. Later, after the jars were sealed, and Paolo had dramatically announced he was returning to carbohydrates because life under gunfire requires focaccia, Dante found me in the scullery drying my hands. He held something small and black in his palm, a velvet box. I stared at it, then at him. No, I said automatically, because fairy tales had trained women poorly, and I could not bear the thought of becoming a prop inside one. A flicker of dry amusement touched his mouth. Open it before refusing me. My face warmed. Inside was not a diamond. It was a ring of plain gold, old and slightly worn, with tiny orange blossoms engraved along the band. Simple, human. The sort of ring someone's grandmother might have worn while kneading bread. It was my mother's, he said. She gave it to my father before he had anything worth protecting except her. I looked up slowly. If I put something expensive in front of you, he went on, you'll think I'm buying forgiveness or obedience. I'm not. The kitchen beyond the half-open door rattled with Myrla's pans. Someone laughed in the courtyard. The world kept happening, indifferent and intimate. I don't want a proposal because I'm carrying your child, I said. It isn't because of the child. Then why? He was quiet long enough that I heard the faucet drip twice. When he answered, his voice was lower than usual, stripped of everything unnecessary. Because when you had every reason to leave, you came back with your eyes open. Because you saw what I am and did not ask me to lie about it. Because the first thing you ever taught me was that fragile things are not weaknesses just because men like me have failed to deserve them. My throat tightened. He took the ring from the box, but he did not reach for my hand yet. Another restraint, another choice. I can give you security, he said. I can give you my name, which is both armor and burden. I can give you the truth when it is ugly, and my word when it costs. I cannot give you a harmless life. Tears burned suddenly and stupidly behind my eyes. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. A breath of laughter escaped him. It's the truest one I had. I looked at the ring, at his hand holding it, at the scar over his knuckle. At the man who had once searched my pocket for danger, and now stood in a kitchen asking for my future like it was something he understood he had no right to demand. Yes, I whispered. He went still. Say it again. Yes. He slid the ring onto my finger with a care that undid me more than any grand gesture could have. It fit as if it had been waiting. Then his hand stayed there around mine. Pocket, he said, same word, different world. I covered his hand with my other one to steady both of us. That sounds unfairly tender on you. It is tender. The admission landed hard because he did not hide from it. I rose on instinct more than courage and pressed my mouth to his jaw. A simple kiss. Warm, quiet, entirely ours. When I pulled back, his eyes had gone darker. Careful, he murmured. With what? With me? I thought we were past that. We are. His thumb brushed the ring once. That's what makes it dangerous. From the doorway, Paolo sighed theatrically. If you two keep looking at each other like that, Paolo said from the doorway. Myrla's going to oversalt the pasta out of spite. Myrla appeared behind him and smacked the back of his head with a folded towel. I salt for flavor, not vengeance. Paolo rubbed his skull. That is not what your face says. Dante's hand was still around mine. He did not let go. For a moment, none of us moved. Kitchen light on copper pans. Orange peel on the counter. Marmalade cooling in rows of glass jars. The ordinary weight of morning settling over a house that had nearly forgotten how to hold it. Myrla looked at the ring on my finger and went very still. Then she nodded once, brisk and suspiciously shiny-eyed. Good. Someone in this place should make a respectable decision. Paolo frowned. I make several a week. No, Tommaso said from the corridor, shoulder bandaged, face unimpressed. You survive several a week. That made me laugh. Dante looked at me then, not at the ring, not at the room, just at me, and something quiet passed between us. No performance. No vow grand enough to embarrass the walls. Only the shared understanding that whatever this was, it had been paid for honestly. Later, when the kitchen emptied and the marmalade jars had been lined on the sill, he carried them upstairs himself because he didn't trust anyone else not to drop them. I followed him barefoot through the hall, one hand over my stomach, the ring warm on my finger. For the first time since I entered his house, it felt like home. 8 months later, the first thing I heard every morning was not a gun. It was my daughter making the indignant little sound she used when the world had failed to present breakfast quickly enough. Lucia Salveter had Dante's eyes, my stubborn mouth, and absolutely no respect for sleep. I loved her with the kind of force that made language feel ornamental. By 7, the bakery smelled of butter, orange peel, and yeast. My father's old shop had not been saved. Too much had been sold, stripped, forgotten. So Dante bought the narrow corner space 2 streets over from the church where we had first met, and then very carefully behaved, as if it had been my idea all along. Bellini Bakery stood under a faded green awning with a brass bell on the door, and 2 plainclothes security men, pretending badly to be men interested in cannoli. The neighborhood had adjusted in the way neighborhoods do. They bought bread. They kept their eyes open. They learned quickly which black sedan outside belonged to peace and which kind belonged to trouble. Lucia slept in a basket behind the counter while I rolled dough. Myrla ran the kitchen like a military operation disguised as love. Tommaso handled accounts, now with the same severity he once reserved for firearms. And Paolo leaned in the doorway holding a crate of blood oranges and announcing, "I would like everyone to note that I carried produce up 2 flights of stairs without eating a single pastry." Myrla glanced up from the espresso machine. "Do you want applause or insulin?" "Support," he said. "I want support." She took 1 orange from the crate, inspected it, and tucked it into the pocket of his jacket without a word. Paolo went silent. I looked up in time to see his whole face change, not dramatically. That was not their way, just enough. Tommaso, writing figures at the side table, muttered, "Dear God." It finally happened. Paolo touched the orange in his pocket like it was an engagement ring. "No one speak to me. I'm having a private religious experience." I laughed so hard Lucia woke up and glared at all of us from her basket as if we had violated labor law. The bell over the door rang. The bakery changed before I turned around. No one gasped. No one bowed. But the room recalibrated itself the way rooms always did when Dante entered. Stillness first, then him. He wore a dark coat over an open-collared shirt, no tie, one hand gloved against the January cold, the other bare. Winter air followed him in stone, rain, the faint salt of the harbor. Under it, the cedar scent I had learned to recognize before I saw his face. He crossed straight to Lucia's basket. Everything dangerous in him eased. He touched 1 finger to her tiny fist. She caught it on instinct and refused to release him. Paolo sighed. "See, even the infant understands commitment better than Myrla." Myrla threw a dish towel at his head. He caught it and looked absurdly pleased. Dante glanced at me over Lucia's basket. "You were supposed to sit more. I am sitting internally. That is not a medical term. It should be." His mouth shifted. That tiny almost smile still had the power to undo me. I dusted my hands with flour and came around the counter. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little," which meant no. He had spent half the night closing out the last of Cesaire's old roots, turning inherited rot into something cleaner, if not clean. His world had not become safe. We had simply stopped lying about the cost of loving inside it. Lucia let go of his finger and yawned with operatic outrage. He bent and lifted her with a care that never failed to break me open. Massive hands, impossible gentleness. She settled against his chest as if his heartbeat had always belonged there. There were mornings I still looked at him and remembered blood on the cannery floor. Remembered the chapel glass. Remembered the locked office, the gunfire, the impossible fact that the first thing he had ever taken from my pocket had become the life he now held against his heart. He saw me looking. "What? Nothing. That's never true." He was right. It almost annoyed me more now that I loved him. When the morning rush slowed, I went upstairs to the small office above the bakery where I kept receipts, recipe books, and the memory box I had been pretending for 3 weeks I would organize properly. Inside were Lucia's hospital bracelet, the plain gold ring box, a curl of dark newborn hair tied with cream ribbon, and the old ultrasound photo still inside the protective sleeve Dante had given it. I slipped it into my apron pocket while I searched for a frame Myrla swore she had left on the shelf. The paper made that soft, familiar rasp against the cotton. I froze. Some sounds do not age. They simply gather meaning. Dante was in the doorway when I turned, Lucia asleep now on his shoulder. For one suspended moment, neither of us spoke. Then, because the morning sun was hitting the floorboards just right, and because our daughter's breath was warm, and because love had turned out to be far less graceful and far more survivable than I had been promised. I smiled. I found it. His gaze dropped to my apron pocket. He crossed the room slowly, as if approaching something holy or dangerous or both. When he reached for the photo, his fingers brushing the fabric first, I heard myself say the exact words I had said in terror on the night everything changed. "Please don't crease it." He stopped. Something moved across his face so quickly anyone else might have missed it. Not pain, not exactly, the echo of it. The memory of who he had been before those words taught him where his own humanity was still buried. For one brief silent paragraph, he was unreadable to everyone except me. Dante had heard those words in a hall full of guns and understood, with a violence that nearly dropped him to his knees, that this woman would always protect what was fragile first. Months later, with his daughter asleep against his chest and flour dusting the cuffs of his coat, the truth cost him even more. It cost him the last illusion that love could ever be controlled into safety. He would never survive losing this. He knew it. He loved her anyway. He slid the photo from my pocket with exquisite care. No crease, never again. Lucia stirred, making that tiny offended sound in her sleep. Dante looked down at her, then back at me. "Pocket," he said softly, "same name." 12 chapters of meaning inside it. I touched Lucia's socked foot with one finger. "She has your hands. Poor child. She has your stare too. That will help," I laughed under my breath. "Arrogant. Alive," he corrected. That was the closest he ever came to superstition. We framed the ultrasound photo together that afternoon and set it on the nursery shelf at home between a silver rattle from Meyerla and an orange tucked there by Paolo, for luck and emotional continuity. That night, after Lucia finally surrendered to sleep and the house had gone soft around us, I stood by the crib and listened to the little ordinary sounds that still felt radical to me. Baby breath. Floorboards settling, distant water in the pipes, Dante moving behind me with deliberate quiet. His hand came to rest at my waist. Warm, certain, home. I still do not know if love can ever make peace with the blood it survives. I do not know whether choosing a man like Dante means accepting too much, forgiving too much, becoming someone I once would not have recognized. I only know that he heard a paper rustle in my pocket once and changed the course of both our lives. So tell me, if loving Dante meant accepting the cost of the life he could protect but never make innocent, would you have chosen him too?